In this example, I'm going to be finding the average temperature for a month. So to get started, I want to assume that the user is going to only input good values, but I don't want to assume that it's going to be the same number of days for every month. So I want to ask that from the user. So to get started, I'm going to say the month because maybe it's not for this month that they're finding the average temperature. So I have this number of days for the month. And I'm going to use that total in my for loop. So for each day, I want to look at from 1 to num days, the number of days total. Now, keep in mind, day in this case is my control variable. And I am initializing it at 1, and I'm going all the way up to number of days, and my update is 1, because that's the default and I don't have it written here, but I could write it in if I wanted to. And that would be the exact same thing as what I have here. So for every day, I want to ask the user for the temperature. I also want to report out what day it is. That way, if they lose track of what day we're on, they'll get an update of what it is. And I'm going to use my control variable for that because my control variable is going to be counting through 1 all the way up to the number of days in increments of 1. So if I have my input like this and I run through this whole loop, every time I'm going to collect a new piece of data, but I'm only going to have the very last one stored at the very end of my loop. So using an array, I'm going to have this temp variable growing as the loop grows. And that's what this error is telling me. It's going to be changing size with every iteration of the loop, which is exactly what I want. So for day 1, I want temp to be a scalar of just the value I give for day 1. For day 2, I want it to be a 1 by 2 vector, still storing what I was given on day 1 and now adding what day 2 is, and so on all the way through the end. So let's go ahead and run this and make sure that's working. So let's run it for 4 days. Day 1. So then I ran through all 4 days, and you can see temp over here in my workspace, and it is a 1 by 4 vector. So that's exactly what I want. Day 1, 2, 3, 4, and the values match up for what was input. So now I have the data for the whole month, this case 4 days, but I'll have the data for the whole month stored in temp. Now I want to use that to find the average temp. So I want to take a sum of all of those days, and then I want to divide it by the number of days, and that will give me my average. And so I want to output that average. And then I can go ahead and run my code. And let's just do 5 days, make it easy. So my average should be 100 for this. And I had a typo because it's num day, not num days. Oh, it is num days, it's all caps. So still a typo. And again, that's another reason to run your code a bunch of times. So let's go ahead again, 5 days. And very cold week and very crazy weather. 30 degrees is the average, which would make sense based on what I input. So I know my average is working there. So one thing to keep in mind is it's really important that I put clear here. If I wouldn't have put clear, it wouldn't clear out my variables. And I just want to show you an example if I don't put clear here and all of a sudden I change the number of days. So I'm going to change it to 2 days. So remember right here, check my workspace, temp equals 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. I'm going to give the first 2 values. So these 2 values, 88, 88. And now if you look here, you see that the first one and second one updated. My average is 148. So the reason that is because it added all 5 of those values together and it only divided by 2 instead of only adding the 2 values that I input. Because my vector is smaller this time, and when I didn't clear temp out, it still just kept the remaining 1 by 5 vector and it only stored the first 2 values it changed. So what I want is I want a vector that's growing every time and not going to default to the previous size. Because, for example, if they did a month where it had 31 days and then they went to say February, then those last couple values wouldn't be true and the number I'm dividing by would completely change it and I'd have a much higher temperature. So this is why clear is very important. If I had an example where I had this for loop and I was running through it multiple times, maybe with a while loop, then I would probably want to clear the variable here. And one way I could do that is I could say temp equals nothing. And that would be another way of clearing the variable instead of just relying on this. But in this case, it's not necessary because I do have clear and it's going to clear out the variable when I start the program. It'll start fresh and temp is nothing in the beginning. So again, please go ahead and practice this more. Think about more problems. Build upon this further. Maybe take this and build in different months specifically, or look at what that could look like. Think about different scenarios where you could play around with the temperature data. Look at the data you have in Excel. Use some of that data to run through this and make sure it's working. Just go ahead and explore this further on your own.